Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The screens flickered, the hum of the projector filling the silence. A dozen men leaned forward, shoulders tight with the weight of the operation. Maps spread out, satellite imagery pinned down, voices low and serious. She sat at the far end, uniform crisp, hands folded, eyes sharp. Yet no one asked her opinion. No one even glanced her way. She knew what they were thinking. Too young, too new, too small to carry the kind of burden they all carried. But she didn't argue, she never did, because there was something they hadn't asked about her, something she hadn't told them, not yet. The commander's voice cut through the murmurs. Target compound here, high value, civilians nearby, will be threading a needle. He tapped the map with the end of a pen like he was punctuating every word. The team nodded, one after another, their faces already shadowed by the mission's weight. She let her gaze trace the contour lines, the narrow valley, the ridges that wrapped the small compound like a fist. She saw what they didn't, the blind angles, the trick of light that would obscure a sniper's line of sight, the sound that would carry downwind long before boots ever touched dirt. She wanted to speak, to tell them they were missing something, but her jaw tightened. She knew how it went when the two young tried to interrupt. And yet in that silence her chest burned. Because tonight wasn't just another mission. For them, maybe it was one more box to check, one more operation in a long war. For her, it was something else. A shadow she carried. A name that was never spoken anymore. A debt unpaid. The briefing ended with the scrape of chairs, papers gathered into folders, the commander's final words. We move at 200. No mistakes. No hesitation. The men stood, some joking under their breath, masking nerves with dry laughter. She rose quietly, collected her notes she wasn't asked to give, and walked out. The corridor smelled faintly of dust and coffee. Every footstep echoed louder than it should have. Out by the hangar, the night was breathing. A warm wind carried the tang of jet fuel and sand. She pulled her jacket tighter and stood still for a moment, watching, listening. There was always something in the air before a mission. The silence wasn't silence, it was waiting. She remembered another silence years ago. A kitchen table, her father's empty chair, her mother's eyes red and hollow. She had been 13, too young to carry that kind of grief, and yet it had settled on her like a lead vest. He had gone on a mission just like the ones these men planned. He hadn't come back. No headlines, no ceremony. Just folded fabric and the sound of a flag brushing against her mother's trembling hands. That night, she swore she'd find her way into the same world that had taken him. And maybe, just maybe, she'd carry him back in some unspoken way. Carry the generations before her who had given more than anyone knew. That's why this mission mattered. Why she sat quietly at that table, taking every detail in, refusing to look away. She walked toward the aircraft, the faint thrum of the generator vibrating in the ground. The loadmaster was checking straps on crates, eyes tired but focused. He gave her a nod, the kind that acknowledged presence without question. Sometimes the crew treated her differently than the operators did. Maybe because they saw the same thing in every soldier: gear, weight, exhaustion. Not age, not gender, just the job. Her hand brushed the cool metal of the fuselage as she climbed inside. She found her seat, buckled in, stared at the floor. Around her the others joked, adjusted weapons, checked gear. One leaned back, closing his eyes, already half asleep. Another was scribbling something in a small notebook, maybe a letter, maybe a prayer. Human moments before inhuman tasks. The engines roared alive, a sound that always felt like the world shaking off its skin. She closed her eyes, felt the vibration travel through her chest, and thought of what her father had written once. She still carried the letter, folded so many times the edges had frayed. Don't chase glory, chase meaning. She hadn't understood it then. Now maybe she was beginning to. The flight stretched in darkness. No words, just the rhythm of turbulence, the occasional click of a magazine being seated, a throat clearing, the deep breath of someone bracing for the unknown. She looked around at faces hardened by too many nights like this, and then her gaze fell to her own hands. Small, trembling slightly. She clenched them not to stop the shaking but to feel alive inside the fear. Landing came sudden, rough, the metal beast shuddering as wheels kissed gravel. Red lights bathed everything in a low glow. Boots hit the ground. The air smelled different here, drier, sharper, like stone and fire. She adjusted her helmet, followed the line, heart pounding in rhythm with her steps. They moved toward the ridge overlooking the valley. Each crunch of gravel beneath her boots felt too loud, like the earth itself would betray them. The night was thick, the stars sharp above, the moon slicing pale light across the land. She crouched low, binoculars up, eyes tracing shadows. And that's when she saw it. Something off. A flicker of movement where there shouldn't have been any. A shimmer of heat near the far wall of the compound. She froze, heart climbing into her throat. No one else had noticed, not yet. Her mouth went dry. Should she say something? Would they even listen? Or would they look at her like they did in the briefing, too young, too unsure not to be trusted with a voice? She swallowed hard, whispering into the radio, keeping her tone steady. Possible movement, east wall, thermal spike. The channel went silent for a beat, then a scoff, probably a goat. Another voice sharper, negative, confirm. She hesitated, the pressure of silence pressing on her chest. She wanted to scream that it wasn't nothing, that she knew the difference. But the weight of every dismissive glance in every briefing held her tongue. Finally she whispered, "It's not livestock, it's waiting." The commander's voice cut through. Eyes on, adjust positions, no assumptions. Movement rippled through the team, weapons angled, breath caught in lungs, and for a moment the silence was absolute. She stayed crouched, eyes locked on the compound, heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't know if they would believe her. She didn't know if she believed herself. But deep inside, something told her this was it. The night had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same after tonight. What made her so sure? The question pressed at the edges of her mind as she stayed low, binoculars fixed on the shadows by the compound wall. The flicker of heat was faint, but it wasn't random. It pulsed, shifted, like a breath held too long. Her radio stayed quiet now. The others were watching, waiting, weighing her call. One misstep and they'd never take her voice seriously again. But if she stayed silent, if she let doubt choke her, they might all walk into something they wouldn't walk out of. She steadied her hands, whispered again. Movement confirmed, east wall, holding pattern. A pause, then the commander's voice clipped and even. Copy, adjusting entry plan, snipers, east coverage. That was it, no praise, no disbelief, just orders shifting in response to her words. And yet inside her chest something cracked open, not relief, not yet, but the faintest breath of vindication. The others repositioned. She crawled forward, stones digging into her palms, the scent of dust sharp in her nose. Every sound magnified, the scrape of gear, the low rustle of fabric against rock, even her own heartbeat pounding like a drum in the stillness. She swallowed, tasting metal on her tongue. She thought of her father again. He used to tell her, the hardest part isn't pulling the trigger, it's waiting with your finger on it, knowing when not to. And here she was, finger hovering, waiting. A shadow shifted near the compound, just a sliver. Enough. She exhaled slow, aimed her rifle, breath sinking with the crosshairs. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the tunnel of her scope, darkness, concrete, and a single faint silhouette. Then a voice in her earpiece, "Hold." She froze, obeyed. The figure lingered, then slipped back into the wall like smoke. "Tripwire," another voice murmured. "They're baiting." Her chest tightened. She'd been right. And the realization wasn't victory, it was dread. Because if they were baiting, they already knew. The commander gave low, quiet orders, alternate route, south wall breach, move fast, move silent. The team flowed like shadows, each step careful, deliberate. She followed, the weight of her rifle heavy, the night air cooler now, brushing her skin like ice. Her nerves buzzed, not from fear alone, but from a strange clarity, as if every sense had sharpened, every breath slowed. They reached the south wall, jagged stone rising tall against the night. One by one they scaled, muscles straining, boots scraping. She waited her turn, then climbed, fingers digging into cracks, pulling herself up until the ground below fell away. At the top she paused, crouched low, eyes scanning the courtyard inside. Empty, too empty, the kind of emptiness that screamed danger. She dropped down, knees bending to absorb the shock. Her boots hit dirt, soft, muffled. She rose slow, rifle up, sweeping left, right. The others fanned out, silent signals flashing between them. And then, a whisper of sound, barely there, the scrape of a boot on stone. She swung left. A figure emerged from the dark, weapon half raised. For a split second, time split too. She saw his eyes wide, startled, as young as hers. She hesitated. The man didn't. A shot cracked, the air snapped. Pain seared her arm, white-hot, spinning her backward into the dirt. The sound of gunfire erupted, deafening, sharp flashes strobing against the walls. Voices shouted. The night shattered. She gasped, clutching her arm, warmth spilling between her fingers. The world tilted, blurred. But she forced herself up, teeth clenched, vision tunneling. Around her, chaos, muzzle flashes, bodies moving, dust kicking up. A teammate dragged her behind cover, hands pressing against her wound. "Stay with me, kid." His voice cracked, raw, more human than any order. She tried to nod, tried to focus, but her gaze drifted to the figure she'd hesitated on. He lay crumpled now, still, eyes open and glassy in the half-light, barely older than a boy. Her stomach clenched. The war wasn't black and white, it never had been. The fight dragged on, seconds stretching into lifetimes. Finally, silence reclaimed the courtyard, broken only by ragged breaths, the crackle of distant fire. The commander's voice came low, steady, as if holding the world together by tone alone. "Secure. Check corners. No assumptions." She leaned back against the wall, chest heaving, arm throbbing. The medic crouched, quick hands wrapping her wound, muttering under his breath about entry wounds and luck. She barely heard him. Her eyes were on the boy again. She thought of her brother, younger, reckless, always chasing her shadow. What if he'd been born there instead of here? Would he have picked up a rifle too? The weight pressed heavy, too heavy. And yet, through the haze, something hardened inside her. The hesitation, the doubt, the need for others to validate her instincts. It couldn't happen again. Not if she wanted to survive. Not if she wanted them to survive. The commander crouched beside her, eyes scanning her bandaged arm. His face was unreadable, but his words were measured. "Good call earlier. You kept us out of a trap." It wasn't praise, not exactly, but it was acknowledgement, and for her, that was heavier than any medal. She nodded, lips dry, voice barely above a whisper. "Copy." They moved deeper into the compound, the walls closing in like ribs of a giant beast. Rooms cleared, one after another. Empty beds, abandoned gear, half-eaten food. Whoever had lived here was gone or hiding. And then they found it. A locked door, metal heavy, scratches around the handle fresh, the kind of door that held secrets. The breacher set charges, eyes grim, motions precise. Everyone stepped back, weapons ready, breath shallow. The explosion came quick, controlled, smoke curling through the air. Inside, the room was small, dim, the stench of oil and sweat thick, and in the corner, a cage. Her stomach lurched. Inside the cage, huddled and shivering, were two children. The silence after the discovery was heavier than any firefight. The men froze, eyes darting, breaths caught in throats. The war had many faces. Tonight, it wore the faces of frightened, wide-eyed children who didn't understand why the world had torn itself into pieces around them. She stepped forward, ignoring the throb in her arm, crouching low to meet their gaze. Her voice came soft, breaking the silence. "It's okay. You're safe now." The words felt fragile, almost a lie, because she didn't know if anyone was safe, not really. But the children's eyes softened, just enough to let her reach for the lock. Her hands shook as she pulled them free. Small fingers clutched her sleeve, clung like roots to earth, and in that moment she felt the weight of generations on her back. The promise she'd made at 13, the legacy she'd inherited. She didn't need them to call her soldier. She didn't need their validation. She only needed this to carry someone else through the fire. The commander's voice came quiet, rougher now. "Exfil, priority package." And as they moved out, the children shielded between them, she realized this mission wasn't just about intel. It wasn't about targets on maps. It was about what you carried. And tonight she carried more than her rifle, more than her wound. She carried lives. How do you carry children through a battlefield? That question hung heavy as they moved back into the night. The compound lay silent behind them, the walls scarred, the dust still settling. But silence wasn't safety. Silence was only the space before the next storm. The little boy clutched her uninjured sleeve, steps stumbling to match her stride. The girl, older by a few years, walked rigid, eyes darting, lips pressed tight. She wasn't crying. She wasn't making a sound. And somehow that silence was worse than tears. The team formed a shield around them, weapons outward, eyes scanning every shadow. She walked in the center, rifle slung awkwardly as her bandaged arm throbbed. Every step was a pulse of pain, but she bit it down. Pain was background noise. The children were the only thing that mattered now. A teammate glanced back, murmured low, "We're slower with them." The commander's reply was sharp, final, "Then we're slower." She caught the exchange, felt the weight of it. In war, time was life. Every second lost was another chance for the enemy to close in, but leaving them behind, unthinkable. Her father's voice whispered in memory, "It's not about who you fight, it's about who you refuse to abandon." The ridge loomed ahead, dark against darker sky. They would climb, cross, and signal for extraction. That was the plan. But plans rarely survive the first shot, and tonight had already proven it. The first sound came soft, a crack of stone somewhere behind. The boy stiffened, grip tightening on her sleeve. She crouched instantly, pulling him low. The others froze, rifles rising in unison. Then the echo of footsteps, more than one, moving fast. The commander's hand sliced through the air. "Scatter, take cover." They dove behind rocks, crouching into shadows. She pulled the children close, pressing their small backs against stone, whispering, "Stay low, don't move, don't make a sound." The boy trembled, his breath shallow against her ear. She pressed her good arm around him, shielding, as boots thundered closer. Voices in the night, foreign words, sharp, urgent. She couldn't understand all of them, but the tone was enough. They knew the compound was hit. They were hunting. She felt her chest tighten, the pounding of her heart sinking with the boy's trembling. The girl's hand slipped into hers, cold and small, and suddenly she wasn't just a soldier crouched in dirt. She was 13 again, clutching her mother's hand after the flag had been folded. Small, afraid, wishing someone stronger would tell her it would be okay. But there had been no one then, so tonight she would be the one. The search party drew closer, the crunch of gravel almost on top of them. She slid her rifle up, cradling it one-handed, crosshairs finding a figure. She breathed slow, steady, the way her father had taught her. Her finger hovered. Not yet. The men passed within meters, their voices cutting the night, flashlights sweeping. One beam slid across the rocks just above her head. She held her breath. The boy buried his face in her chest. Seconds stretched, unbearable. Then by some mercy the beam shifted away. The footsteps moved past, fading into distance. She exhaled, trembling, every muscle tight. The commander's whisper came through the comms, "Move, quiet." They rose, careful, silent. The children clung tighter now, their silence louder than screams. Every step up the ridge was a battle, her wound screaming, their weight slowing her, but she kept moving, because stopping wasn't an option. Halfway up, the girl spoke for the first time, a whisper broken and halting. Will they come back? The words cut deeper than the bullet had. She wanted to promise safety, to say no, but she couldn't lie. Not here, not in the dark. So she answered with something else. We'll keep walking. As long as we walk, they don't win. The girl looked at her, eyes searching, and for the first time a flicker of trust. At the ridge's crest, the valley spread wide below, moonlight carving silver lines across stone. Far in the distance, faint lights flickered, too many. They weren't out of danger yet. The commander raised his radio, whispering coordinates, requesting exfil. Static hissed back. No reply. He tried again. Nothing. She swallowed hard. Out here, silence on the radio wasn't just silence. It meant they were cut off. The team exchanged glances. No words, but the truth settled between them. Extraction wasn't coming. Not yet. The commander's jaw tightened. We moved to secondary point. It meant a longer route, harder terrain, more risk. She adjusted her grip on the boy who had refused to let go. Her arm burned, body aching, but she said nothing. If the others saw weakness, it would only confirm what they'd always thought: too young, too fragile. But inside, another voice whispered, "You're not carrying just yourself, you're carrying them. You don't get to stop." They pushed forward, deeper into the ridge line. Hours bled together. The cold crept in, the kind that gnawed at bones, that made every breath visible in thin clouds. At one point, a teammate, older, weary, lines etched deep into his face, dropped beside her as they paused in the shadow of a boulder. He lit nothing, said nothing at first. Just sat there, breathing. Then quiet. "You got family?" The question hit raw. She hesitated, then nodded. "I did." He looked at her, eyes soft in the dark. "Me too, 2 boys, they think I'm invincible." He gave a dry laugh without humor. "I'm not. None of us are." The words lingered. Not comfort, not despair, just truth. She thought of her father again, of her mother still waiting, of her brother out there somewhere. And she realized something. The war didn't just take lives. It took illusions. Stripped people down to what they really carried inside. The march stretched on, feet dragging, silence heavy. At last they reached a narrow pass, jagged cliffs rising on both sides. A choke point. Dangerous. But it was the only way forward. The commander signaled halt, scouts moving ahead. She crouched with the children, brushing dust from their faces, whispering small reassurances she didn't know she believed. Then a sound split the night. Not footsteps, not voices. The low, distant rumble of engines. Her blood ran cold. She looked up, saw the faint glow of headlights cresting the far ridge. Vehicles, too many. The commander's whisper was urgent. "Incoming convoy, heavy, find cover." The team scattered, pressing into rocks, pulling the children low. She curled around them, shielding their small frames with her own. The ground shook as the convoy rolled closer, engines snarling, the metallic clatter of mounted guns. She bit her lip until she tasted blood. This was more than they could handle. If spotted, they'd be torn apart. The vehicle slowed, stopped, doors slammed, voices carried. Boots hit the ground. They weren't passing through, they were searching. She held the children tighter, heart hammering so loud she was sure it would give them away. The boy whimpered softly, muffled against her chest. She closed her eyes, whispered words she hadn't prayed in years. Not for herself, for them. And in the darkness, surrounded, hunted, she knew the night wasn't over. The real test hadn't even begun. How do you hide from a storm that comes with engines and guns? The ground trembled beneath her boots as the convoy idled in the narrow pass. The cliffs amplified every sound, the metallic rattle of weapons, the hiss of radios, the heavy boots scattering gravel. She pressed the children lower against the rock, her own body curved around theirs, heart hammering so hard it almost shook the stone. The commander's voice hissed faintly through the comms. "Hold, silent." She barely breathed. The boy's face was buried against her chest, his small fingers digging into her vest. The girl trembled, but her jaw was set tight, refusing to cry. Silent, just like she had been since they found her. Engines cut, then doors slamming, voices, dozens of them, searching. Flashlights cut the dark like knives, sweeping across the pass. Beams of harsh white light brushed stone, lingered on boulders, then drifted away. Every time one neared her, her chest constricted until her lungs burned. A shout cracked the night, sharp, angry. Then a single shot. A body hit the dirt somewhere unseen, followed by laughter. The kind of laughter that made her stomach twist. They weren't just searching. They were sending a message to whoever might be hiding. Her hands trembled, but she locked them around the children. She remembered being their age, remembered hearing the low hum of a car pulling up outside her home long before she knew her father was gone, remembered her mother's silence. And she thought, if they died here in this pass, it would be the same silence for someone else's kitchen table. The commander whispered again. Secondary plan, wait for opening, slip past. But what opening? The convoy filled the pass like a dam. Dozens of men, armed and alert. Any movement, any sound, and it would be over. Minutes bled into hours, or maybe only seconds. Time warped in the press of danger. Then the sound of footsteps, closer. Boots crunching gravel, moving toward her position. Her breath caught. She slid her rifle up with her one good arm, slow, deliberate. The barrel hovered just above the rocks. The boy's small body shifted against her chest, his breath hot and quick. The boots drew closer, flashlight beam cutting across the rocks. It swept higher, higher, and then paused just short of her position. The man muttered something, spat into the dirt, turned back. She exhaled so hard her chest ached. But the reprieve was fragile. The convoy wasn't leaving. The search was widening, and every second pressed them closer to being cornered. Then the commander's whisper came again, not to all, just to her. You've got eyes on the east slope. Her throat tightened. She hadn't told him, not fully, but she had noticed earlier when they first scouted. A narrow trail up the cliff, barely visible but climbable, risky, exposed, but maybe their only chance. Yes, she whispered. A pause, then you lead. Her stomach dropped. Lead, she wasn't ready, she wasn't sure, and yet the words came before she could think. Copy. She shifted, tugged the children close. The girl looked at her, eyes wide, searching. The boy clung tighter. She bent close, whispering in the softest voice. We're going to climb now. Stay quiet, hold on to me, don't look down. The girl nodded. The boy didn't, but he didn't let go either. The commander's signal came. A small distraction, 2 quick bursts from the far side of the pass. Gunfire rattled, shouts erupted, flashlights swung, and in that chaos she moved. She pulled the children, guiding them to the base of the slope. The path was no path at all, just jagged stone, loose gravel, shadows pretending to be handholds. Her wounded arm throbbed, useless, so she gripped the rock with her other, guiding the children upward. Each step scraped stone, small pebbles tumbling into the dark. Every sound felt like a thunderclap. She pressed her body against the cliff, shielding the children, whispering steady encouragement. One step, good, don't stop, keep climbing. The boy whimpered once, slipping, but her hand caught his shirt, yanking him close. She pulled him against her chest, whispering fierce. I've got you. I won't let you fall. The girl climbed just ahead, her silence broken only once when she whispered, Why are you helping us? The question cut through the night like a blade. She didn't answer right away. Her throat was dry, her arm burning, her lungs on fire. But finally, between breaths, she said, Because someone should have helped me. The girl said nothing after that, but she climbed faster. Behind them, the firefight still sparked, voices echoing, lights swinging wildly across stone. No one had noticed them yet. Not fully. Not until. A shout. She froze. The beam of a flashlight snapped upward, catching the faintest glint of movement on the rocks. Gunfire roared. Bullets sparked against stone, chips flying. The children screamed, voices swallowed by the night. She pressed them flat, heart-pounding. The commander's voice crackled urgent in her ear. "Keep moving, we'll draw fire." And they did. Gunfire erupted from the far side, louder, sharper, tearing attention away. The shouts shifted, weapons turning. She took the chance, pulled the children upward, forcing her legs to climb faster, ignoring the tearing pain in her arm, the sting of stone ripping her palms. At last, the crest. She shoved the children over the lip, then scrambled after them, collapsing on her stomach, gasping for air. The boy sobbed against her, clutching her vest. The girl sat trembling, staring down at the chaos below. From up here, the convoy was a storm of light and sound, vehicles burning fuel, men shouting, muzzle flashes sparking like fireflies. But they hadn't seen. Not yet. The commander's voice again, calm, steady. "Keep moving, East Ridge, we'll regroup." She pulled herself to her knees, gathering the children close. Her body shook, exhaustion pressing in, but she forced herself upright, one foot, then the other. And as they moved into the deeper dark of the ridge, she realized something. This wasn't about being too young anymore, or too small, or too ignored. It was about carrying weight no one else could. And tonight, she was carrying the weight of generations, hers, her father's, the children, all tangled into one path through the dark. She didn't know if they'd make it. But she knew one thing. She wouldn't let go. Not again. Dawn didn't rise gently. It bled. The black of the ridge gave way to bruised purple, then to the pale gray of morning. And in that shifting light, every jagged stone, every twisted tree, every scar of the earth seemed sharper, crueler. She stumbled forward, the children close behind, exhaustion dragging at her bones. Her throat was raw, her lips cracked, every breath scraping like sandpaper. The climb had taken more than she had to give, but still she moved, because stopping wasn't an option, not now. The boy tripped, falling hard. His small body sprawled in the dirt, and he cried out, voice breaking. She dropped to one knee, pulling him close, pressing his face into her chest to muffle the sound. The girl crouched nearby, silent but watchful, eyes darting toward the horizon where the convoy's engine still echoed faintly in the valley below. "Quiet," she whispered, more plea than command. Her good hand stroked the boy's hair, steadying her own shaking. "We're almost safe, just a little farther." But she knew safe was a lie. There was no safe here, not on this ridge, not in this war. Safety was a myth, a story told to children so they could sleep at night. The commander's voice hissed in her ear. The comms were faint now, the signal patchy this far up. "Status." She swallowed hard. "East Ridge, children intact, still moving." A pause, then, "Good work, hold position until link up." Hold position. Easy words. But what did it mean? Stay still out here in the open with daylight bleeding across the sky and enemies below. It felt like waiting for death. She glanced at the children. The boy was still clinging to her, trembling. The girl's face was pale but fierce, her jaw set, her small hands gripping the hem of her torn dress like fists. Hold position. No, she couldn't, not like this. She scanned the ridge, eyes narrowing against the pale light. To the east, the slope dipped into a scatter of trees, thin cover but better than nothing. Beyond that, she thought she saw smoke curling faint and dark against the dawn. A village, maybe, or a trap, but either way, a direction. "Change of plan," she whispered, half to herself, half to them. "We keep moving." The girl tilted her head. "Against orders." The question was sharp, adult almost. She met the girl's gaze. For a moment she saw herself reflected there, small, too serious, carrying weight no child should. "Yes," she said simply. The girl didn't argue. She just nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. They moved. The ridge narrowed, forcing them to walk single file, stones skittering loose beneath their boots. Each sound felt magnified in the morning stillness. Her ears strained for every noise, a snapped twig, a distant shout, the guttural growl of engines. But for now, all she heard was their breathing and the quiet rush of wind. Her arm throbbed. Blood had dried stiff against her sleeve, the wound crusted but angry. Every movement sent fire shooting up to her shoulder. She pushed through it, jaw clenched, steps steady. Pain was an old friend. She knew how to walk with it. The children were slower. The boy lagged, stumbling, his small legs barely keeping pace. The girl helped him, one hand gripping his wrist, tugging him onward with surprising strength. Together, the three of them were a fragile line of survival moving through the wilderness. Then a sound. Low, metallic ahead. She froze, yanking the children behind a boulder. Heart hammering, she peered around the edge. Through the thin line of trees ahead, a figure moved. Alone, armed, enemy colors. Her breath caught. She dropped lower, pulling the children with her. The boy whimpered, but she pressed her hand to his mouth, whispering against his ear. "Quiet, please, quiet." The soldier stepped into clearer view, rifle slung, gaze sweeping the ridge. He was searching, slowly, deliberately. If he found them, it was over. Her mind raced. Fight. No, her arm was weak, her aim unreliable. The sound of gunfire would bring others. Hide, maybe. But the boys shaking, the girls breathing, could they stay unseen long enough? The soldier paused, scanning. His hand went to his radio. She knew that move, knew what came after. Her pulse thundered. She rose, silent as she could, her good hand closing around the knife strapped to her vest. It felt heavy, final. She had used it before, but never like this. Not in silence, not face to face. She glanced back at the children. The girl's eyes were wide, locked on her. The boy buried his face in his sister's shoulder. This was the choice, kill or be killed. Her feet moved before her thoughts caught up. She crept closer, knife trembling in her grip. Each step was a lifetime. Then a voice in her ear, the commander's sudden sharp. "Contact nearby. Do not engage. Repeat, do not." The soldier turned. His eyes locked on hers. Time shattered. She lunged. The knife struck, clumsy but brutal. They fell together, his body twisting, his rifle clattering against stone. She pressed down, teeth bared, the knife sinking deep. His breath rattled, hot against her face, then stopped. Silence. Her chest heaved. Blood slicked her hand, warm and real. She stared at the man beneath her, eyes glassy, mouth slack. A stranger, a life she had just ended. The girl's whisper broke through the fog. "You killed him." It wasn't accusation, not quite, it was observation, fact. Her throat closed. She wanted to say something, an explanation, a justification, anything, but no words came. Instead, she wiped the knife against her vest, shoved it back into its sheath, and forced herself upright. Her hands shook, but her voice came steady. "Move now." They skirted the body, the boy clinging tighter than ever, the girl walking in silence. The ridge dipped into the trees, swallowing them in shadow. For a moment, hidden in that fragile cover, she allowed herself to breathe. But the weight was there, heavy, final. The first man she killed had been in battle, a faceless blur in smoke and fire. This was different. This was close, personal. His eyes had seen her. And now he was gone. Her mind replayed it with every step, the turn of his head, the widening of his eyes, the resistance of flesh against the blade. She clenched her jaw, forcing it down, burying it deep. She couldn't afford to break. Not here, not yet. The girl walked beside her now, silent for a long while. Then, softly, "Will we have to kill more?" The question cut deeper than the knife. She didn't answer right away. Her throat burned. Finally, she said, "Only if we must." The girl nodded, small and solemn, too solemn. The boy didn't ask, he didn't look, he just held tighter. They walked on. By the time the sun crested the ridge fully, the smoke ahead was clear. A village, small, broken. Half its houses were rubble, walls caved in, roofs burned black. The rest stood crooked, fragile against the sky. She hesitated at the edge of the trees. Villages meant people, people meant risk, but also food, water, shelter. She crouched, pulling the children close. "We go careful, stay behind me, don't speak unless I tell you." They nodded. The path into the village was silent. No voices, no movement, just the creak of wood in the wind, the distant buzz of flies. Her boots crunched on shattered stone. Each step echoed, too loud. They reached the first house. The door hung open, splintered. She stepped inside, rifle raised, scanning. Empty, except for a table overturned, and a child's toy lying in the dust. Her chest tightened. They moved deeper. The village was a graveyard, abandoned or worse. Then a sound. A cough, weak, human. She froze, motioned the children to stay low, slipped forward, knife ready. In the shadow of a collapsed wall, an old man lay. His body thin, wrapped in rags. His eyes fluttered open as she neared. "You," his voice cracked like dry wood, "not them." She crouched, wary. "Who?" He coughed again, blood flecking his lips. "Convoy took the rest, burned what they left." Her stomach twisted. The convoy, always the convoy. The man's hand trembled, reaching toward her. "Children." She hesitated, then motioned the boy and girl forward. The man's eyes softened, wet with something she hadn't seen in years, relief. "Good," he whispered, "not all lost." Then his breath rattled once, twice, and stopped. She stared down at him, the weight of his final words pressing heavy. "Not all lost." Her gaze shifted to the children, their faces pale, eyes wide, clutching each other. "Not all lost." For the first time she felt it, not just the burden of survival, but the fragile seed of something else. Something like hope. Maybe small, maybe weak, but alive. And in this war, that was everything. How do you explain survival to people who have only known loss? She sat in the shadow of the broken house, back pressed to the wall, rifle across her lap. The boy slept against her side, his small chest rising and falling, each breath fragile as glass. The girl didn't sleep. She never seemed to. Instead, she sat across from her, knees pulled tight to her chest, eyes sharp even in exhaustion. The old man's body lay covered beneath a ragged blanket, still and silent. His last words lingered like smoke, not all lost. But the silence after him was worse. Her comms crackled faintly, the commander again. "Where are you?" She exhaled slowly as if the sound might betray her. "Village, abandoned, one survivor deceased." A pause, then, "You were told to hold." Her jaw tightened. She glanced at the children, at their hollow cheeks, their cracked lips. Orders didn't include leaving them exposed on a ridge. Another pause, longer. She could almost hear the weight in his silence, the irritation threading with something else, respect, maybe, or reluctant understanding. "Copy," he said at last. "Sit tight. Extraction window moves tonight. Survive until then." Survive, always survive. But she didn't answer. She cut the comms, shoving the device back against her collar. The girl's voice broke the silence. He sounded angry. She met her gaze. Commanders always sound angry. The girl tilted her head, "And you don't always listen." It wasn't judgment, just truth. For a moment she almost smiled, almost. The day stretched heavy. Heat settled over the ruined village, pressing down until every breath felt thick, slow. Flies buzzed lazily over shattered beams. Somewhere, a metal sheet clanged against the wind, rhythmic, taunting. She forced herself to move through the houses, searching. Food was scarce, a few cans dented, their labels long rubbed away. Water even less. But she gathered what she could, tucking them into her pack. In one house she found a photograph pinned crooked to a wall. A family, a mother, a father, 3 children, all smiling. The edges of the photograph were burned. She touched it briefly, fingertips trembling. Then she turned it face down and left. Back in the shadowed corner where the children waited, she divided the food. Small bites, careful sips of water. The boy ate hungrily, his small hands shaking. The girl took her slowly, methodically. When it was her turn, she only pretended. Letting them think she'd eaten was easier than watching them refuse so she could. The girl noticed, though. She always noticed. "You need strength too," she said softly. "I'll be fine." "You're lying." The words landed heavy, sharper than any accusation, but there was no anger in them, just observation. She didn't answer, couldn't. The girl didn't press. By late afternoon, the sound came. Engines, distant at first, then closer. A convoy again. Her stomach dropped. She shoved the children deeper into the shadows, crouched low, eyes fixed on the edge of the village. The first truck rolled into view, armored, its paint caked in dust and mud. Soldiers clung to the sides, rifles slung, faces hidden beneath helmets. Another truck followed, then another. She counted 1, 2, 3, too many. The engines growled as they slowed, wheels crunching against broken stone. The lead truck stopped in the center of the village, dust rising around it like smoke. Voices barked, orders she couldn't catch. Doors slammed, boots hit the ground. She gripped her rifle tighter, finger brushing the trigger. Her pulse raced, throat dry. The boy whimpered against her, tiny fingers clutching her sleeve. She pressed him close, whispering against his hair, "Quiet, please." Through a crack in the wall, she watched them move, systematic, searching. One soldier stepped into the house across from them, weapon raised. Another scanned the rooftops. Another kicked open a door. They were hunting. Her mind spun. Choices collapsed. Fight, impossible. Run, nowhere to go. Hide, fragile at best. Her breath came shallow. The girl whispered, barely audible, "What do we do?" Her answer was steady, though her heart thundered. "We wait." The seconds dragged like hours. Boots clanged, voices shouted, the trucks roared again, and then, just as sudden as they came, they began to pull away. One by one the engines faded, dust settled, silence returned. But her hands still shook. The girl's gaze was fixed on her, unblinking. "You were scared." She exhaled hard, leaning her head back against the wall. "Yes." The girl nodded, small, solemn. "Me too." It was the simplest truth, and somehow the most human. Night fell heavy. The commander's voice crackled again. "Extraction team inbound. Mark your position." Her throat tightened. She looked at the children curled together in the dust, already half asleep. She looked at their thin faces, the dirt on their cheeks, the faint rise and fall of their breathing. "Mark your position. Hand them over. Mission complete." But to who? Her hand hovered over the comm. What if extraction meant safety for her but not for them? What if it meant being separated, processed, forgotten? Her chest ached. The girl's eyes opened suddenly, sharp even in the dark. "What's wrong?" She hesitated, then, "I don't know if I can trust them with you." The girl studied her. "So don't." Simple word, impossible choice. The comm crackled again. "Time's thin, mark now." Her thumb brushed the transmitter. She thought of the convoy, of the old man's last words, not all lost. And she thought of her own past, the weight of names unspoken, faces left behind, graves unmarked. Her voice came low, steady. Negative, position compromised, moving on foot. Static filled the line, then sharp, "That's not protocol." She closed her eyes. Neither is leaving children to die. The silence on the other end was long, heavy. Finally the commander's voice, softer, resigned. "God damn it, fine, you move, but you better make it count." The line went dead. She lowered the comm, chest tight. The girl's voice came in the dark. "You chose us." She turned her head, meeting her gaze. "Yes." The girl's lips pressed together. Then slowly, she leaned against her, small and warm, her trust wordless and whole. For the first time in years, she let herself feel it. Not strength, Not survival, something quieter. Something like belonging. The night stretched long, but for once she didn't feel alone. And as the wind whispered through the broken village, she held them close and whispered back, almost to herself. Not all lost. The night was not kind. It pressed down heavy, thick as smoke, the stars sharp against the black sky. The ridge ahead seemed endless, each step climbing deeper into silence. Only the crunch of boots against gravel marked their progress, slow, steady, fragile. She carried the boy now. He had tried to walk, tried to insist, but his small body finally gave in, limp with exhaustion. His head rested against her shoulder, breath warm against her collar. Her injured arm screamed with every jolt, every shift of weight, but she held on tighter. The girl walked at her side, always at her side, watching steady, too steady for her years. For hours they moved through darkness. No words, just the sound of wind, the rasp of breath, the ache of silence. Then the girl spoke, voice soft, like a thought she hadn't meant to release. "Why did you really stay?" The question hung there, heavy. Her throat tight. She wanted to say the easy thing. Orders, mission, duty. But the girl's eyes waited in the dark, sharp, unblinking. She swallowed hard, "Because I couldn't leave you." The girl tilted her head. "Why us?" A pause, her boots scuffed against stone. She didn't answer at first. Couldn't. Then quietly, "Because once someone left me." The girl stopped. Her small shadow froze in the moonlight. Who? Her chest ached. She hadn't said it out loud in years, not to anyone. "My brother." The word cut open something she thought long buried. She kept walking, but her voice shook. "We were just kids. War came fast. He ran to fight, and I begged him not to, but he said I was too young. He said I had no place, so he left me behind." Her throat burned, the memory clawed. He never came back, just his name on a list, that was it. The girl's eyes didn't leave her. "And you became a soldier anyway." "Yes." "Why?" She almost laughed, bitter, hollow. "Because I needed to prove he was wrong, that I wasn't too young, that I wasn't too weak." The girl's gaze softened. "But you don't fight for him anymore." Her steps faltered. She looked at the girl, stunned by the truth of it. "No," she whispered, "not anymore." They stood there in the night, the boy asleep against her, the stars watching. And for the first time she felt the past loosen its grip just a little. The ridge bent east, narrowing to a path carved into stone. Wind howled through the gap, sharp and cold. She paused, scanning. Her instincts buzzed something wrong. Her eyes caught it, a flash of metal in the moonlight. A tripwire. Her chest seized. She shifted the boy carefully into the girl's arms, pressing her finger to her lips. Then she crouched low, studying the wire. It was crude, tied to a rusted can, buried shallow, connected to something deeper, maybe a mine, maybe worse. Her breath came slow, booby traps. The girl clutched the boy tighter, eyes wide. "They're waiting for us." She nodded once, "Or driving us somewhere else." She scanned the ridge. Shadows moved below, faint, crawling, watching. Her pulse thundered, ambush. She grabbed the children, pulling them close. "Run." The girl's voice cracked. "Where?" "Up, always up." They scrambled, boots slipping against loose stone, hands clawing at the ridge. Shouts erupted below. Flashlights cut the dark, beams slicing across the rock. Gunfire cracked, sparks danced against stone. Her body moved on instinct. She shoved the children ahead, pressing them flat against a ledge, covering them with her own body. Bullets chewed the air. The stone vibrated with impact. She bit down on a scream as a round grazed her leg. Heat seared, pain burning deep. The boy whimpered, muffled by her chest. The girl clung to her arm, eyes wide with terror. "Stay down," she hissed. "No matter what, stay down." Minutes stretched endless. The gunfire slowed. The shouts grew fainter. The lights drifted away. Finally, silence again. Her chest heaved. Blood seeped from her leg, warm, sticky, but they were alive, somehow still alive. The girl whispered, shaking, they knew we'd come this way." "Yes." "Then where can we go?" She pressed her forehead against the stone, breath ragged. "Anywhere they don't expect." But even as she said it, she knew nowhere was safe. By dawn, her leg throbbed with every step. The wound slowed her, dragged her down. She stumbled often, nearly dropping the boy. The girl finally stopped, turning to her. "You can't carry him anymore." Her pride flared. "I can." "No, you're bleeding." She met the girl's eyes, fierce, unrelenting, a soldier's eyes. Her chest tightened. Slowly she lowered the boy into the girl's arms. The sight tore at her, this child carrying another, but she said nothing. They walked together, slower now, fragile shadows against the rising sun. The path curved toward a ravine, jagged cliffs rising on either side. She hesitated. Natural choke point. Dangerous, but they had no choice. Halfway through she heard it, a voice, low, broken. "Wait." She spun, rifle raised. A figure staggered from the rocks, a man, uniform torn, face bloodied. One of theirs. Her breath caught. He collapsed to his knees. "Don't shoot." She rushed forward, lowering her weapon. "Identify." His lips cracked a weak smile. "Bravo unit, hit on the ridge. I lost them." Her chest clenched. Another survivor, another ghost. She dragged him to shade, the children hovering close. He gasped, clutching his side where blood seeped thick. "Ambush?" she asked. He nodded faintly. "They knew everything. Our routes, our signals, like they were inside our heads." Her stomach turned, a leak, a betrayal. His eyes found hers. You're the one they doubted, too young, too green." The words cut sharp, but his next breath was softer. "Don't listen, you carried further than any of us." His hand trembled. He pressed something into her palm, a folded map smudged with blood. "Safe passage, old tunnels, east, follow them, it's the only way." Her throat burned. "You come with us." He shook his head, eyes already dimming. "No time, not for me, just carry them." His gaze flicked weakly to the children. "Carry them further." His breath rattled, then stopped. The girl whispered, trembling, He died too." She stared down at the map, at the blood staining her fingers. "Not all lost." She closed his eyes gently, then rose. "We move east." The tunnels came by dusk, hidden in the cliffs, half collapsed, their mouths dark and narrow. She crouched, leading the children inside. The air was damp, cold, reeking of earth. Each step echoed hollow. The boy clung to her hand, shivering. The girl held the map, reading its blood-smeared lines by dim light. Deeper they went, into silence, into dark. Her leg throbbed, her arm burned, her chest ached, but she moved. Because they followed her now, and she couldn't stop. Not yet. The night had gone quiet again, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but heavy, as if it knows something you don't. She crouched near the burned-out remains of a truck, the metal still warm, the smell of smoke caught in her hair. Around her, the unit rested, not asleep, not really resting either, just breathing, just waiting, because none of them knew if dawn would bring relief or another storm. She kept her rifle close, but it wasn't the weapon that weighed on her chest. It was the faces, the ones she'd seen, the ones she'd lost, the ones she still carried. Too young, they had called her, too green, too small for this kind of war. But no one had seen the way she tightened her jaw when the world doubted her. No one had seen the way she folded her grief into her spine and stood taller because of it. Her hands trembled only when no one looked. Her voice steadied only when someone needed it more than she did. That was the secret. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the quiet decision to act anyway. A sound carried across the valley, distant, muffled. Not gunfire, not engines. A horn, a song. It made the others shift uneasily, but she froze, listening closer than anyone else. She recognized it. Not the melody, but the tone. It was the same pitch her father used to hum when he came home late from duty, thinking no one heard, a memory tucked inside a war zone. She didn't say anything. How could she? They'd think she was losing it. Maybe she was, but the sound stayed with her long after it faded, and it made her wonder, had she been carrying her family's generations on her back all along, or were they carrying her now? One of the younger soldiers, barely older than she had been when she enlisted, broke the silence. "Do you think we'll ever go back to normal?" His voice cracked in the middle, unguarded. She didn't answer right away. She looked at him, mud on his cheek, fear in his eyes, but still holding on. She thought of all the answers she could give. No, maybe, not in the way you're hopping. But what she said instead was soft, almost like she was speaking to herself. "Normal isn't waiting for us. We make something new." He nodded slowly, though he probably didn't understand fully, but his breathing eased, and maybe that was enough. The horizon began to change, a faint silver cutting into the black, dawn creeping forward, careful, hesitant, just like them. She pulled her scarf tighter, not against the cold, but against the weight of what morning would bring. Orders, movement, choices that might save one and cost another. The thought returned to her unshaken. They had said she was too young for duty, but here now she understood. Duty was never about age. It was about bearing what others couldn't or wouldn't. And that night, under the heavy silence, she had carried more than herself. She had carried the voices of her family, the fears of her brothers in arms, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still something left worth protecting. And when she finally closed her eyes just for a moment, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, full of everything they had endured and everything they still would. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.